Good morning, good morning. How are you doing this morning? Welcome to our chess class. Let's see. So, if you haven't been in one of our classes before, welcome. Very glad that you're here. Feel free to post a comment into the chat and just kind of say hello or something. Do realize you do need to be logged into YouTube to be able to post something, but welcome. Very glad that you're here. So let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Alex Cooper. I teach the computer classes at the Columbia County Libraries. I teach for the Columbia County Library in Evans, the Grovetown Library, and now the Uchi Creek, now Grovetown Library. Yay. Let's see. I'm very glad that you're here with me today. I'm actually going to post a handout into our chat so that you can follow along as well. And of course, I'll start off our class with what I always ask is, how can I help? Okay. Have you played chess before? Have you tried to learn chess a little bit? Now's a good time to learn chess, of course. Play with friends or family and stuff. I know that everybody's kind of staying home, staying safe, and we're doing all our classes virtually here on YouTube. So now's a good time to be able to kind of learn something new, okay? Or work on your skills a little bit instead. How about that? Let's see. There we go. Okay, so yesterday we did chord cutting. That video still should be up and available as well. Basics of chord cutting. This afternoon we're actually going to be doing a library and resources and apps class. Let me disappear here. Doing a libraries, resources, and apps class this afternoon, and hopefully you'll join me for that. We'll talk about free stuff from the library that you can use, checking out ebooks, Acorn TV, all kinds of fun stuff. And tomorrow we're actually going to be doing the YouTube 101 at 11 o'clock, and then Raspberry Pi projects with me live. We're going to be working on basically making kind of like an electric piano sound machine using our Raspberry Pi, and just be kind of a fun project. So come join me with that. I'll list everything that will be needed and required, and we'll just kind of build it together. Okay. Next week is our Word class, Excel, and PowerPoint. So come join me for that. And then at the end of the month, it'll actually be our photography series. And we've changed the classes around a little bit here. We have a advanced photo editing class. Now it's going to include working with layers and compositions. So be ready for that. And also photography printing and virtual scrapbooking too. Just a little side note, our libraries are open with limited services and hours. Curbside Holds Pickup is available. You can go to gchrl.org for details, or call the library for more information, questions, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates. Also, right now you're on our YouTube channel, but you can search YouTube for gchrl.org for more information. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started with our chess class today. And I'm going to go ahead and post the handout into our chat, and if anybody has any questions before we get started. We have a little cheat sheet to kind of get you started. It's a neat thing to have next to you while you're trying to play. Hey Mac, welcome, welcome. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. I posted a link to our handout. It's a short kind of cheat sheet to all the topics we're going to be talking about today. And I also will pull it up to later, kind of to correspond with our learning. Usually what we would be doing is basically getting everybody ready to do a chess class. Well, I'm a little bit invisible there. We'll get everybody ready to basically do a chess tournament that we would have coming up. And the fun thing about that is that not only would we be prepared for that, but we also have a two-step class. So basically it would be, let's learn about this now, and then we're going to not only get ready for this class, but we'd also get ready for classes in the future and our chess tournament coming up as well. Okay, so let's get going. Let's talk about what we're going to cover this morning. We're going to talk about the history of chess, a game of planning and strategy. We'll talk about the benefits of playing chess, the sportsmanship, chess etiquette, game pieces and movement, how to set up a chessboard, the special rules like Passant, captures, castling, and then we'll also briefly talk about the algebraic system of chess notation. Mostly this is so that if you're writing down or keeping track or watching a professional game, you'll kind of grasp that concept. It's not that big a concept to grasp, but we'll cover it a little bit. And I've got it on the cheat handout thing too. We'll talk about strategies, and then we'll play a game called Checkmate in 1. Okay? So let's kind of briefly talk about the history of the game of chess. The history of chess spans some 1,500 years. Okay, chess actually traveled. It was very popular. So people buying and selling things back and forth from different countries would actually take the game along with them. Okay, the earliest version of the game originated in India. Before the 6th century AD, from India, the game spread to Persia. When the Arabs conquered Persia, chess was taken up by the Muslim world and subsequently spread to southern Europe. In Europe, chess evolved into its current form in the 15th century. The game is played during early Middle Ages, was slow, with many games lasting for days. Some variations and rules began to change the shape of the game by 1300 AD. A notable but initially unpopular change was the ability of the pawn to move 2 places in the first move instead of 1. Okay, and we'll talk about that. A queen and a bishop remained relatively weak until 1475 or 1500 AD. In either Spain, Portugal, France, or Italy, the queen's and bishop's modern moves started and spread, making chess close to its modern form. So it's not a perfect game, but it's taken lots and lots and lots of years. You could say hundreds. I guess we'd just say hundreds and hundreds of years to be able to get to the game that we have today. Basically, in Europe, some of the pieces gradually changed their names to queen, bishop, pawn moving 2 squares in the first move. This led to an en passant rule. A pawn placed so that it could have captured the enemy pawn if it had moved 1 square first was allowed to capture it on the passing square, and we're going to cover that in detail. King jumping once to make it quicker to put the king safe in the corner. Okay, and that's our castling. Okay, in 1850s, modern chess tournament play began. First World Chess Championship was held in 1886. In the 1900s saw establishment of the World Chess Federation. 1970s, computers for analysis, first programmed chess game on the market. Okay, 1995's the online gaming appeared. Okay, with chess. So. Hello, hello. It is considered a game of strategy and planning because during the game you play and do certain strategies based on the position elements of the pieces. However, the answer is not quite as simple as saying that chess involves strategy and planning. The thing to notice is that chess does not involve chance. Ooh, what does that mean? All the theoretically possible moves and your opponent's possible next moves that are known, defined, and visible for both players affects your strategy and planning. The further ahead your brain can plan, the stronger you can become as a player. A player with better planning and strategy will always win. Some games depend on chance, which we talked about a second ago. Card games, what cards you draw in Gin Rummy, for example, is random. Okay. Board games like Monopoly, who loves Monopoly? Love Monopoly, great game, but it is involved in chance because of the roll of the dice. Board games like Monopoly, where the outcome depends in part to the roll of the dice. These games, luck will enable a player to win a game, even if his planning and strategy are not as good as his opponent's. This is not true for chess. Here's a short list of just some of the benefits of learning and playing chess. Provides practice at making accurate and fast decisions under time pressure. Drill skills that can help improve exam scores. Improved reading. Pattern recognition enhanced. Teaches sportsmanship. Dealing with difficult choices. Making the best choices from a group of good choices. Teaches to learn from mistakes. There you go right there. Responsibility for actions. Concentration is vigorously practiced. Logical reasoning is shaped. Measurable individual accomplishments are enjoyed. Critical thinking, memory is enhanced. Problem solving and what if skills. Intellectually mature is fostered. Intellectual maturity is fostered, sorry. Belonging to a good group, self-esteem, mind enrichment, mental exercising, the importance of planning. Let's talk about some sportsmanship. Okay. Have you played a game or sports with someone that maybe was a poor sport, you'd say? Big thing is we need to be polite and get off to a good start. Don't boast, trash talk, or try to intimidate your opponent. Don't argue with your opponent. Don't ask or give advice. I know that's hard. But if you're playing a friendly game, maybe the other person doesn't really know much, I would probably start out with the game with just being, well, this is just a fun game. So hopefully no one gets frustrated or anything. It says don't give advice during a real game, though. Okay? If you're really trying to win and if they're really trying to win, don't give advice. Another thing is don't be annoying. Okay? Don't try to trick your opponent by pretending to make a bad move. Said, oh no, I made a bad move. Don't do that to your opponent. Don't try to rush your opponent. Come on, make a move or not, whatever. After your game, be a good winner or loser. Because remember, if our game doesn't end, we can't start a new game. Okay? That's with any kind of game. If our game doesn't end, we can't start a new game. After your game, I just said that. Saying check is what? It is actually not required, but it's considered polite. So what exactly does check mean? Check means in your next move, you'll capture their king. Now, it's not in the rules that you have to say that, so that they be given an opportunity to get their king out of check, but it is the polite thing to do. Okay? So let's talk about our game pieces and our movement. Okay? Big thing is how to win. Okay? Checkmate or trap the opponent's king. That's how you win the game. How to start. The white side always goes first. At the start, choose who will play the whites. So either you can roll a piece whose piece points at wins. In class, sometimes we'll do the classic rock, paper, scissors, just to kind of keep it lively. How to capture: land on a square occupied by one of the other player's pieces. Okay. Let's talk about the movement of the king. Okay. Importance: the most important piece. It can move one square. Movement: it can move one square at a time in any direction, just one square. What is check? When the king is placed in jeopardy of being captured. So, if your king gets captured, the game is over and the other player wins. If you capture the other player's king, then the game is over and you win. Most of the time, we don't actually have a physical knocking the king over. You just know that you won. What to do when in check, meaning your king is in danger of being captured. The king must be moved out of check, or the attacking piece blocked by another piece. What is checkmate? The king is in check and cannot move to a safe square, and the danger cannot be blocked or the checking piece captured, then game over. Okay. Look for the cross on top of the king to distinguish it from the queen. Okay. Let's talk about the rook, or what someone would say is the castle. Okay. The rook can move one or multiple squares in a straight line or in any direction, like the cross, plus sign, whichever you want to say, up, down, left, right. 2 rooks per side for a total of 4 on the board. It occupies the 4 corners of the board. Ooh, the knight. Okay. Some will use the knight kind of like a sniper, because it kind of comes in and kind of can jump over other pieces. The knight has the most complicated move, like an L shape. Okay. It can move 1 square straight and 1 square diagonal any direction. Only piece which can move around another piece. Okay. So most will probably do the L. So you do the long 2 pieces here, jump a piece, and then left to right. Okay. Jump, left, right, or you could say 2 spaces, left, right, or you could do the 1 and then 2, whichever you want to do. Whichever works for you, but just kind of think of an L. There are 2 knights per side, 4 knights per set. Placement: the knight occupies the square right next to the rook in the back row. Okay. Movement: can move 1 or multiple squares in a diagonal direction. So this is the bishop, kind of like an X, a Diagon alley, as someone might say. How many? Bishops also number 2 per side. These are located next to the knights in the back row. These are the only pieces which occupy only 1 color square during the entire game. Okay, so that kind of goes with your strategy a little bit. There's 2 of them. They only can be on 1 colored square the whole game, because their movement is like an X. Here's our queen. Notice the queen does not have the cross on top. The importance of the queen: the most powerful piece on the board. Okay. It can move 1 or multiple squares straight or diagonal. So it's kind of like putting a rook and a bishop together, because we have a up, down, left, right, cross, cross, cross. Okay. How many? Each player only has 1. Okay. The queen is located on the right of the king at the beginning of the game. The pawn. Haven't even gotten to the pawn yet, have we? Well, here's our pawn. Pawn is the weakest piece. Okay. has movement, can only move forward one square at a time, but on its initial move, it can move 2 squares. It cannot move backwards. Captures only diagonally. Okay, so first move, the pawn can move 1 square or 2. Here's our piece, and if another piece is right in front of it, it cannot capture because it captures to the 1 square diagonal. These 2 squares here, this square here, and this square here, it can capture. This square here, this square here, it can capture. This square, this square. So one of the things that can happen with the pawn, if you get more than one pawn out there, or if you get their pawn comes up and it's kind of like your pawn and their pawn are a standoff, it's kind of like you've made a wall, okay? A wall to protect your pieces and a wall that you can't go through, okay? How many? There are 8 pawns on each side. Placement, entire second row of the board is occupied the pawns, okay? So right there. What is pawn promotion? So, we're getting into something early here, aren't we? Advancing a pawn to your opponent's last row of squares, it can be promoted to a piece of any rank, okay, except the king. So for most, if I can get my pawn, remember you can only do 2 moves at the first time, and the rest of them have to be 1 square move, 1 square move, 1 square move. Get to the other side here. Then if he's not captured or blocked in any way, gets to the opponent's row, actually is promoted to a different piece. Most people choose the queen. So here's our pawn being promoted to being a queen. Even if you already have one queen on the board, you can have another queen. There's actually some puzzles that they actually set up that are like 9 queens versus 9 queens. Games. So let's talk about setting up our chessboard. So if you do have a chessboard in front of you, go ahead and pull it out and start setting it up now. A big one to remember is on the right is the white square, okay? The bottom right should be the light color or the white square, depending on what board you have. So the right should be white, okay? The bottom right. The bottom right should be white or something like that. How about that? Whatever helps you to remember. Now, some people might say the bottom left should be black or dark, okay? Depending on what kind of color board you have. But there you go right there. Just realize that the kings and the queens mirror each other. Okay? So if you're setting up the board as the white side here, and there's the black side there, the king is here and the queen is on the left. The king is here and the queen is on the black left from the viewpoint of the white. Okay? And there's our pieces. Alright, let's talk about some of our special rules to begin with. We have en passant, okay, capture. And I have a few videos in here we're going to be showing today to kind of more visually explain some of these moves, strategies. En passant capture is a special pawn capture which can occur immediately after a player moves a pawn 2 squares forward from its starting position, and an enemy pawn could have captured it. It moved only 1 square forward. The opposite captures the. So there's two big rules here that are kind of mysterious. You've gotten the pieces down. You've gotten how to win. But now there's these 2 odd rules you have to learn. And the rest is kind of strategy, how you want to go about playing. The opposite captures the just moved pawn as if taking it as in passing. So repeat after me. En passant. En passant. En Passant. It means as in passing, okay? The resulting position is the same as if the pawn had moved only one square forward and the enemy pawn had captured normally. Now, again, this kind of goes along with your handout. So any of these special rules, I've got both of them in there. The en passant capture must be done on the very next turn, or the right to do so is lost. Such a movement is the only occasion in chess in which a piece captures but does not move to the square of the captured piece. Okay? So, got a little video. Any questions so far? I do know that the chat is a little bit delayed. So, if you realize you post a question, it may take me a minute to get there, but I will, I promise.
Hello.
All right, we're going to start off by letting a grandmaster chess person come talk to us. Did y'all know that was going to happen today? You didn't? Okay, well, we're in the right place. Here we go.
Hello, future chess players. This is International Master David Bruce for Chess.com, and today I will be teaching you one of the exception rules in chess, which is capture.
Now, do realize I'm going to pause it. He has some questions. I'll pause it and see if you can come up with the answer. Just kind of shout it out wherever you are.
Capturing en passant. And en passant is français for in passing. And it is the one capture in chess where your piece does not end up on the square of the piece it captured. Usually in chess, if you were going to capture a piece, you would pick up a piece of yours that was going to do the capture. You would pick up a piece of the opponent's that you were going to capture, and then you would put your piece down where that piece had been. And that's how all captures work, basically, is just you walk onto the square where the other piece was, and then you remove it. But en passant is the one exception to that, and it is a special move where the other person's pawn moves two spaces, like this, and then you capture their pawn with the pawn next to it as if they had only moved one square. So it looks like this. Now, let me take you back in chess history a little bit and explain to you where this move comes from to help you remember it. And then we'll just go over it a couple more times. So chess used to have a rule that pawns could move one space at a time. Now they can move two spaces if they are on the second rank or the seventh rank, right? So it used to be pawns could move one step at a time. And so what you would see is you would see the pawns moving like this slowly towards each other. And then finally they'd come into contact. And now these two pawns, either one could capture the other and the battle starts. Well, at some point, people's attention spans really decreased. And they decided that they couldn't wait this long to start the battle, right? So they added the rule that pawns could move two steps at a time. But a very, very important thing about pawns is whether they're passed pawns or not passed pawns. So it's a very important question whether this pawn here could walk all the way down to the board and become a queen with this pawn never being able to capture it. That's a very, very important question if you have any way to get past this pawn. So theoretically, you shouldn't have any way to get past it. See, no matter how I move the white or black pawns, at some point there comes a move where they could capture each other, right? If I move them two steps at a time, there still comes a point where they could capture each other. So these are not passed pawns. They're pawns which still have an opposing pawn that could get them. So that brings us to this guy over here. Is he a passed pawn? No, there is a pawn on the neighboring file, and he should not be able to walk all the way down the board and become a queen without this pawn having the chance to capture him on his trip. But let's say he makes this move. How's this pawn supposed to capture him, right? Legally, this pawn's only supposed to capture on these two squares. So did this guy just run right past him? So they decided that that would mess up the way chess played too much. So instead of allowing the pawn to run past like that, they decided to create an extra rule, which is to capture in passing. So when a pawn passes you by, you can capture it by moving as if it had only gone one step. Now, this option is only available for one move. You don't have the option to capture on a3 for the rest of the game. You can't like move your king and their pawn keeps going and you're doing something with your king attacking this pawn and they come here and suddenly you realize that this pawn is going to become a queen, so you move your pawn to a3 and say, I capture your pawn in passing. Absolutely not. You can't even do that if their pawn remains on a4 and they now move their king. You can't suddenly realize, wait, I should capture their pawn. It's a one-time option, okay? So it's just saying the pawn can't go past you without you having the right to capture it for a moment, but if you won't take that right, if you won't exercise it, it's taken away from you, like so many other rights. So the pawn, if it goes past you, you've got a one-move window in which you can capture it behind like this. All right, so now let me ask you a question. Let's say this pawn here and this pawn. Can this pawn capture that pawn en passant by going to the d4 square? Yes or no?
How would you think?
The answer is no. This pawn here is not a pawn that has just moved two spaces, right? In fact, all captures en passant must occur with a pawn that has just gone from the second rank to the fourth rank, right? And the pawn that captures it has to be on the fifth rank and then take it. Okay? So how about this? Black plays this move. Can white capture this pawn en passant? If you answered yes, you now understand how to capture en passant. And I'm very happy for you. Okay, so one more quick question just to check on your full understanding. So black has a pawn on c4, and now white moves their pawn from d3 to d4. Is black allowed to capture that pawn en passant because the pawn is on the right rank, and the white pawn is now on the right rank as well? Can black capture it like this? The answer is no, because this pawn has only moved one step. En passant is only when that pawn rushes past you by moving two steps, not when it moves one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on chess.com.
All right. Do we have a little bit better understanding of en passant now? Okay, good. Let's keep moving. Let's talk about our second special rule, and that's castling. Okay. Castling can only occur if there are no pieces standing between the king and the rook. Neither king nor the rook to be castled with may have moved from this original position. There can be no opposing piece that could possibly capture the king in this original square. The square is square he moves through, or the square that he ends his turn on. A big one with this is, what I recommend for newer players is basically, I'll have folks come to class. We'll spend the last 30 minutes, 40 minutes of class, basically allowing them to play the special rules, and of course the encouraging them to play the castling as well. Okay, so not only are they probably doing some of their first kind of games, games that people play for years, maybe they didn't even know about the castling or en passant, and then encourage them, okay, now make sure that you do the en passant and make sure that you do the castling rules. So make sure, so I encourage you after you do this class to basically next chess game you do, just let them know that you're trying a different move, tell them about it, who you're playing. Maybe someone else maybe didn't know about the castling. It's possible. But it's a great move to get your king out of attack, okay? Moving him to a different place on the board. The king moves two squares, toward the rook. He intends the castle, with. This may be either the rook. The rook then moves to the square through which the king passes. Okay? I have a little video to kind of explain that a little bit more.
Hey everybody, International Master David Pruce here for Chess.com, and today we're just going to go over a really important special move in chess. There aren't too many of these. There is En Passant, which is a special way to capture with pawns. Another video covers that. And there is castling, which is really a very, very valuable move. So good to know, which is a way that you can sort of reverse the position of your king and your rook. So castling is useful because usually your king will be in some danger in the center of the board and your rooks will be somewhat useless outside of the center of the board. So you'll want to sort of reverse that situation. You're allowed to make this move only if there's no piece in between your king and rook. And you can do it towards the king side or towards the queen side. Now, the basic rule for castling is you move your king 2 steps towards the rook and put the rook on the other side of your king. So, for example, we would move this king to g1, and then the rook jumps to f1. Or, if we do it in the other direction, again, you move 2 spaces, even though you won't end up at the same spot, and the rook hops to the other side of the king. Always the rook ends up next to your king. Okay, so black will also castle queenside. Moves his king 2 steps, and the rook comes to the other side of his king. Okay, so that's the basic rule of castling. That's what it looks like when you castle. Now, there are a couple side rules to realize. In addition to not having anything in between your king and rook, you need to not violate certain rules about check, which is when your king is attacked, okay? So let's say that black played this checking move with the queen. White is not allowed to castle when their king is in check. So this is not a legal way to escape from check, to move your king 2 spaces to g1. You would now have to move your king to avoid this check. Okay? Now, second rule about castling. You cannot castle through check. So since black controls the f1 square, white is not allowed to castle kingside here, though he could castle queenside. And the final rule is that you can't castle onto a square where you would be in check. So here the black queen has moved, so she's covering c1. That means white cannot castle queenside. That would be illegal to put your king in check. Okay, so 3 rules for when you cannot castle. You can't castle when you are in check. You can't castle through check. And you can't castle into check. Okay? And, sorry, but there's more. You are not allowed to castle if you have already moved your king or your rook. So remember when black checked the white king, this would actually, in this case, since white can't block or capture the queen, this would prevent white from ever castling. Because now the white king has moved, so he's no longer allowed to castle. So black checks the white king again, the white king moves, and now black castles to get their rooks into the game. Now, is white allowed to castle either side? The answer is no, because the king has already moved. All right, now here's another example. Let's go back to the beginning here. I'll play h3 for white. Black plays queen takes b2, attacking this rook, and I move the rook to save it. Now black castles. Am I allowed to castle kingside now, even though I've moved this rook? I can, because this is not the rook that I'm castling with, so I can castle kingside. But let's say instead of castling, black had retreated his queen, and I moved my rook back here, and now black castled. Would I be allowed to castle queenside? Absolutely not, because this rook has moved. Okay, so I can't castle queenside, but I can castle kingside. But one restriction which does not apply, just to be clear, is this. If black plays this move, attacking the rook, is white allowed to castle queenside? This is from my starting position. So the king hasn't moved, the king is not in check, the rook hasn't moved, the rook is attacked. The answer is I can castle queenside, see, because I never put my king on a square that was attacked by the black queen. So it is legal to castle when your rook is attacked, but not once you've moved your rook. And those are the rules for castling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on chess.com.
Okay, so hopefully that explained it a little bit better and kind of covered all the rules. So just realize the main thing is just make sure that you have to move our two pieces here out of the way. It's one jump for the king, and remember it's all one move here, trying to get them out of the flow. So we'll talk more about that with our strategies a little bit. Here's our algebraic system and notation. We'll kind of cover this briefly, and then we'll do one of our few games, and I have another video. Let's see. Oh, and I have a fastest checkmate in chess move to kind of talk about that, and also another one, good moves in chess. Let's see.
Now that you've learned how to move, to capture, to check,
we'll talk about our opening strategies as well. Okay, so let's go right ahead. So basically the biggest thing about this is, here's our board here. We have our A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, okay? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, if you deal anything with Microsoft Excel, the first thing you will start talking about is calling them rows, which is what I've done, and you may even hear me say that, rows and columns. And it's similar because A, or the letters, always go first when you're talking about this, okay? So, yeah, you would say something like D3. Want to move my pawn here to D3, I just say D3, and it would move the pawn. You'll also hear this in TV shows and movies and stuff like that. But the vertical rows are actually called files, okay? Not columns. And the horizontal rows are actually called ranks, not rows, okay? But it's okay if you do that just with someone that's not, you know, not as hardcore tournament or whatever. You're just saying the letters or whatever. So basically it comes into here. Here's our biggest thing to learn is that, here's our biggest thing to learn is that thus each square has a unique identification of file letter followed by rank number. For example, the white knight starts the game on square E1, okay, while the black knight on B8 can move to open square A6 or C6. The big thing is that when you're writing the notation, here's the letters there. So K is king, Q is queen, but K is already taken for knight, so what do? We move to the next letter. This is really the only one you have to remember, is that knight is in, okay? B for bishop, R for rook, and pawn, actually, you do no letter, and that means it's the pawn. Won't go into it too much here. Kind of step over some of this. But checkmate, which we're about to talk more about checkmate here. Checkmate is plus plus, okay? A move that puts the opponent king in check is noted by a plus, and a completed last move plus plus, okay? So here's kind of our normal board here, and it lists the whole game. You can actually see famous games that have been played, famous chess players, and they'll keep all that and go back and actually replay the games they played. So let's talk about strategy in chess, okay? And I have a little video.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Taxman, and I'm with Chess NYC, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 3 principles to opening strategy. So, when we get to the game, we're always like, what do I do? There's so many pieces, I don't know how to start. Well, I'm going to give you 3 steps that are going to help you create a strong, confident opening. First thing that we need to understand is these 4 center squares. These are considered our super squares because this is where the center of the board is, the control center. For example, if I have my knight in the center of the board, my knight can control up to 8 different squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can see that this is a very strong place for my knight. If I have my knight on the side of the board, it can only control up to 4 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, my knight is stronger in the center, whereas most pieces are stronger in the center of the board. So, at the beginning of the game, we want to think about center control. First thing we can do is try and get our pawns into the center. Very important to try and get our pawns to control the center. The next important step that we want to focus on is piece development. Now, I like to think about my pieces as they are working for me. I want to give my pieces a job. If they're sitting back here, they're not happy and they're not doing anything. So my next step is to bring my pieces out and have them working for me. Usually we bring up the knights before the bishops. So I can bring my knight to f3 and my other knight to c3, and then I'm bringing them towards the center. Notice how I did not bring my knight to h3. That would not be a good choice. Towards the center. Next, I want to bring my bishops out. Again, towards the center, controlling the center squares. The next step that we always want to consider is king safety. Very important. I like to consider the king like a baby. The reason I consider the king a baby is because we always want to protect our babies, just like we always want to protect our king. Therefore, the best way to protect our king in the beginning of the game is to castle. Now we have two ways that we can castle. We can either castle on the king side or on the queen side. Right away, I can see that I can castle on the king side. To castle, I move my king 2 spaces and then bring my rook to the other side. And now my king is stuck behind a little fortress, or to keep with the theme of a baby, a crib, and it is protected and safe. Just to review, the 3 important principles are controlling the center, piece development, and king safety. Those are the 3 things that we can do at the beginning of the game to go into the middle game confidently.
Okay. So let's talk about our strategies of chess. These 3 are the opening, middle, and end game. Okay. Each stage has different goals and objectives. Opening stage, you want to get a rapid development of your primary pieces. Okay, you also want to safeguard your king, just like our video showed. Safeguard your king by castling. In this phase of the game, you want to try to achieve dominance over the middle 4 squares of the board. Generally, the last opening piece, the opening lasts between 10 to 20 moves roughly. Whoop. The middle game is where you want to coordinate your primary pieces, and attack your opponent's weak spots and open files. Okay, the goal is to win primary pieces from your opponent. Maybe even you can get their queen, which that would be a big deal. Able to checkmate your opponent. The middle game is approximately from the end of the opening phase until around move 40. End stage, the end game, is when you use your remaining primary pieces to take advantage of the weaknesses that you created in your opponent's defense during the middle game. The end game often concludes when one of the players is able to move a pawn to the other side of the board, thus turn that pawn in for a queen. This is then followed by a checkmate or a resignation. Strategy, not tactics, are what need to be considered in the end game. Opening principles, just like she talked about: centralization, quick development, early castling, and knights before bishops. Centralization, the most important part in the chessboard is the center. Okay, pieces placed in the center attack more squares than those positions in the side of the board. The knight placed at d4 can effectively attack 8 squares, just like she showed. If you do not control or possess a fair share of the center, then it might be difficult to maneuver pieces from one side of the board to the other side of the board. The second important part of classical opening principles is quick development. You might know that pawns are the lowest, the minor pieces such as bishops and knights. The queen and the rooks are the major pieces on the chessboard. Of course, the king is superior. Let me go ahead. I have a little video. Let's go ahead and let's talk about, of course, early castling as soon as you can. Let's talk about the fastest checkmate in chess. Or hang on, let's see, which one?
Now that you've learned how to move, to capture, to check, and checkmate, as well as do the special moves in chess like castling and en passant, it's time for you to feel what it's like in a real game. In a real game, nobody is there to tell you what to move. You have to think and decide, what is the right move? Should I move a piece? Or can I capture something? Should I castle? Or try to promote one of my pawns? This is where the thinking part of chess comes in, and you have to try and decide what your best move is. The only way to do this is by looking at the board and considering both your options and your opponent's possible plans, and then trying to decide which move improves your position the most. Sometimes the right move will jump right out at you. Rook h8, checkmate. At other times, you'll have absolutely no idea what the best move is. Let's see if you can find a good move in each of the following positions. Black is currently up 3 pawns, so Black decides to offer a trade of queens, thinking it will be easier to win the game without having to deal with White's queen. Black didn't consider what the queen was doing on the 8th rank. Can you find White's best move? The Black queen gave up protection of the back rank and forgot to ask what checks White has in the position. White only has 1 check, but it's checkmate. If you found Queen e8 checkmate, great job. This checkmate is known as a back rank checkmate. In this position, after Rook a1 check, it looks like Black is about to deliver a back rank checkmate. What is White to do? Well, if White decides to block with Rook e1, notice that doesn't help because after Rook takes e1, it's checkmate. Let's look a little closer. Can you find another White piece that can help us deal with the check? If you found the move bishop takes a1, great job. The bishop moves all the way from the other side of the board to come to the rescue, capturing the checking piece. Remember, if you can capture a checking piece, this can often be the best way to get out of check. In this position, what do you think is White's best move? If you're thinking Rook a8 delivering a back rank checkmate, you have to remember, it's not just your moves you have to consider, we also have to figure out what is our opponent doing. In this position, White's best move is also White's only move, because notice, White is in check. And in this position, White must deal with the check first and play King h1. Now Black has to be careful and deal with White's threat on the next turn. In this position, can you find White's best move? Notice that we can capture a pawn with Rook takes e4, but then Black is able to do the same thing with Knight takes a7. Remember, when you find a good move, always look for a better move. Don't forget about your pawn on a7. It's 1 move away from reaching the 8th rank. Do you remember what happens when a pawn reaches the other side of the board? That's right, the pawn gets a promotion. Notice the newly promoted queen puts the Black king into check and threatens the knight all at the same time. After king f7, queen takes c6 wins the knight. It takes time and practice to find the best move. Now it's your turn to continue practicing finding the best move.
All right, hopefully that was helpful. Talking about early castling, pushing ahead. Knights before bishop. Another part of the classical opening principles is to move the knights before the bishops. As already stated, the knights can be moved without waiting for the pawns to leave way because the knights jump over other pieces, as they are capable of jumping over pieces lying in between the original square and the destination. As such, it is suggested that knights are moved into the front before opening up the bishops. Castling is only permitted if all the following conditions are held. So we've already talked about castling a lot, haven't we? Now this is actually going to talk about the different kind of checkmates there are available. Just remember that when your piece is in check, your king is in check, that has to be your next move. Okay. Draws. The game ends in a draw if any of the conditions occur. Okay. It's king against king, king against knight and bishop. Okay. The game ends in a draw if any of these conditions occur. Both players agree to draw after one of the players makes such an offer. Okay. Players having to move may claim a draw by declaring that one of the following conditions exists. 50 move rule. There has been no capture or pawn movement the last 50 moves for each player. Threefold. The same board position has occurred 3 times with the same player to move. So basically you're just kind of moving around the board. Exploiting weaknesses. Chess requires that we look for weaknesses in each of our opponent's positions while keeping ourselves out of weak positions. As always, the game remains a balance of attacking and defending. A weakness is simply a flaw in a position that we can exploit. These weaknesses can be anything from an open line to a poor piece placement. Could be rush. They feel like you rushed them, but they feel like they have rushed themselves to make a move they didn't think all the way through. Depending on what stage we are at in the game, we will see different weaknesses in our opponent. So let's go ahead and let's watch. See, where is it? There you go. The fastest checkmate in chess.
Chess can often be a long game with more than 100 moves played, but it can also be incredibly short if you want it to be. Many people want to know, what are the fastest checkmates? And we are going to show you, but keep in mind, none of these checkmates can be forced. These are only checkmates that you literally have to try to do on purpose because they can be otherwise defended very easily. Let's see the shortest possible checkmate on the board. White plays f3, not a great opening move, already exposing the king on the e1 to h4 diagonal. Black opens with e5. Notice the black queen is already looking at the weakened h4 square, ready to pay the white king a visit. White plays g4, further weakening the e1 to h4 diagonal, and the black queen pounces on the h4 square, delivering the fastest checkmate in chess. Notice that the white king cannot move, there's no way to block the check, and you can't capture the checking piece, so after 2 moves, the game is already over. In fact, it's time to start a new game. Let's see that idea again, but this time it'll be white delivering the checkmate. After e4, black plays f6, d4, g5. And can you spot the checkmate? That's right. Queen h5, the fastest checkmate for white, is in 3 moves, and the fastest checkmate for black is in just 2 moves. Let's hope that you never find yourself on the wrong side of this checkmate. Now it's your turn to practice the fastest checkmates.
All right, how about that? Let's talk about our other weaknesses and flaws here. Chess requires that you look for weaknesses in our opponent's position while keeping ourselves out of a weak position. As always, the game remains a balance of attacking and defending. course, a recurring aim of chess strategy is to force your opponent to choose between a bad scenario and a downright unpleasant one. King safety and unsafe king is generally the greatest weakness in your game. Pawn structure. The quality of your pawn structure can usually be judged by these factors: how it supports and affects the mobility of the pieces, how dynamic it is, the presence of weaknesses like some isolated pawns, and the squares which have been permanently weakened by the pawn moves. Talks about our tempo, our timing a little bit. Let's go ahead and let's play our checkmate in one game. We're just going to do the 5 of these, and then we'll kind of open up for questions. And I've got 2 other videos to show too. So here's our checkmate in 1. So this means in 1 move we are the white. It is our move, and we're trying to checkmate the king in 1 move. And I'll give everybody just a minute to kind of look here. Can you find what move you should do? All right, so let's think about our pieces. Let's think about where our pieces can go. So what about moving our rook here? So here's our rook. Of course, it moves in a plus sign motion. So if it went all the way up here and tried to capture the king, we'll start with our simple moves here. So it tries to come up here. It does have the king blocked there, but then what could happen? The king could capture him, couldn't he? Okay, so that wouldn't work out. Remember that when you actually have your piece in check, the other pieces can't move. So that actually would not work very well for us. What about our pawn? Can our pawn do anything? It can move here. Probably not. Our king is probably well guarded right this second. Okay. What about our bishop? What could our bishop do? What you think? I think so. So what if our bishop moved right here? What could happen there? Could it be captured in some way? The king can only move 1 space. But what could the bishop do if the king was in check? Can the king move itself into checkmate? Because if the king moves here, it can be captured by our rook. So that is it. End of game. Checkmate if you move the bishop here. Even though the king could still move here, he is in check. So he's the only piece that can move. There you go. Boom. Answer is bishop to f6. There you go. f6. Bishop There we go. Did you get it? All right, so let's look at this one for a minute. I'll give you a minute to look at it. All right, let's talk about our pieces here. Remember, we are the white, and it is our move. And let's see. So, can we move our rook? So our rook, remember this is all checkmate in one move. So if we move our rook and captured here, what would happen? Well, the king could then capture our rook, couldn't he? That wouldn't work out for us. What's about to happen here? Okay, looks like their next move, they basically will get they could do two things. They could get the they could capture our rook, or they could actually get here and then get pawn promotion. Okay, wonder which one should they do. So if they get pawn promotion and then comes along and capture them, it won't really do much, will it? But they could actually do here and actually get this and pawn promotion at the same time. So my rook is in danger as well. So I have to end this game. So let's see what else we have going on. Well, can our bishop go anywhere? It's blocked here. It can't go here. And it can't go here. In our next move, this rook could capture our bishop, so we don't want that. Our kings will never capture each other. Okay, they can't put themselves in check. So the king would have to put himself in check to be able to capture the other king, so they'll never actually capture each other. So what do we have? Well, we have our pawn here. The pawn could capture this rook here. Okay, and that would actually get this out of danger. And what would happen there? Let's see. So what do you think? I think you might be right. Let's see. Let's see. So if our pawn actually moves to B4, okay, it captures the rook, and now our bishop, okay, can actually capture the king, and the king can't move here, can they? No. How about there? Okay, so that's probably our best move right there. Okay. All right, so let's look at part 3. I'll give you a minute to look at it. All right, so let's look at our pieces here. See what choices we have. Same thing's going on. We are the white. It is our move, and we're trying to get it for it to be checkmate in our next move. So let's see. Got our queen here. Queen could capture the rook here. But what could our knight do as well? But remember, the king has to get out of check. So what about here? Could move there? No. Let's see. Move here? No. Oh, there's a rook coming up. Could capture the knight. But then the king could capture him. Let's see. So what do we think? So let's see. Queen captures on G8. There you go, right there. So if the queen comes up, captures the rook on G8, not in danger, but the king cannot move. Okay, so therefore you have your checkmate. Did you get it? All right, let's try our next one. We're just going to do one more after this. So let's look at it real quick. All right, so what you think? Well, let's look at our pieces here. So here's our king. Is our king in danger right now? Actually, our king is not in danger right now, is he? What about our rook? Let's see, what can our rook do? Rook can move here. Up, move there, then the king can capture him. What if it moves over here? If the king would be in danger, but then the king could move over here if he wanted to. Let's see, where else could we put this? Remember, we're doing checkmate in one. Aha, let's look at our other piece up here. I think I might have an idea. So what do you think? Do you remember what pawn promotion is? So let's go ahead and let's look at our answer. There's actually two answers to this. And this helps us kind of learn what pawn promotion is a little bit better. So if a pawn can get to the last row up here, okay, it can actually do pawn promotion. Most of us would do the queen, okay, but technically in this point you could do a rook because the game's almost over and kind of showing off, okay. So this rook is blocking the king from going anywhere else. Their own piece is blocking them. And if this comes up, becomes a queen or rook, then it can capture the king and the king can't move. Okay, can't get out of check, so that means the game's over. All right, so let's look at our last one. Okay. So did you figure it out? Let's look at our pieces. Remember, we're still the white. It's our move, and we're trying to get checkmate in the next move. So here's our bishop. Where can our bishop go? What about here, here, here? What about our king? Is our king in danger? King is not in danger right now. What about our pawn? Now our king can't move here, can they? Because our king, their king cannot move here because our king is right here. The bishop can't move there because our king is right there as well. But let's see what our answer is. It's our bishop to C7. That's right. That means our bishop could come in and actually capture the king. Okay. The king would be in check. Doesn't have any place they can go. To capture the king. In the next move. And then we win. Here we go. Okay, so now that we've covered that topic, let's go ahead and let's talk about our clocks briefly. And that's kind of to get folks ready to do the tournament in our class. And then we've got 2 other videos. We're going to talk about our clocks and stuff. Then we'll kind of wrap class up and see if there's any other questions. So here's our handout, kind of our cheat sheet to kind of go along with everything we've covered today. Setting up our chessboard, knowing our moves, understanding check, checkmate, and stalemate. We talked about our special rules, en passant. We talked about castling, protecting our king. We talked about some basic strategies, protecting our king. A good one is don't give away pieces. There is actually a number system that you could use if you wanted to. Controlling the center of the board is one of the things that we talked about. Use all of your chess pieces. Your pieces will not do any good when they are sitting back on the first row. Try to develop all your chess pieces so that you have more to use when you attack the king. Using 1 or 2 pieces to attack will not work against any decent opponent. Here's our rank and file. And there's some resources here. Some of our videos, most of our videos came from chess.com. It's a great resource. Let's talk about chess tournament rules, okay? Many tournaments follow a set of common similar rules. These rules do not necessarily apply to play at home or online, but you may want to practice them anyway. Touch move. If a player touches one of their own pieces, they must move that piece as long as it is a legal move. Okay? If a player touches an opponent's piece, they must capture that piece. A player who wishes to touch a piece only to adjust it on the board must first announce the intention, usually by saying adjust. Clocks and timers. Most tournaments use timers. Now this is the thing that we would use in our tournaments, was timers. Mostly our goal is just to get students prepared to play in a chess tournament if they wished. And we just kind of have a fun chess tournament at the library. Of course, we're all staying home and staying safe right now, so no chess tournaments, but when we start classes again, we will definitely do chess tournaments in the future. Most tournaments use timers to regulate the time spent on each game, not on each move. Each player gets the same amount of time to use for their entire game and can decide how to spend that time. Once a player makes a move, then he or she touches a button or hits a lever to start the opponent's clock. If a player runs out of time and the opponent calls the time, then the player who ran out of time loses the game, unless the opponent does not have enough pieces to checkmate, in which a case is a draw. But most of the time, it's the timer runs out. So if you're playing on a time clock, this is similar to the one that we have in class. Timer runs out, you lose the game. Okay, so I have a nice little video, and also he talks about our clocks a little bit, and he also talks about how some folks would basically play speed or blitz chess.
Hello, this is David Sullivan from Chess NYC again. Today I'd like to talk to you about blitz chess and use of a chess clock. Most serious games of chess are timed, and actually that's a really good thing. I think a lot of people are under the impression that chess is an extremely slow game, when actually it often is an extremely fast game. One popular form of the game is called 5-minute blitz. On the clock face, each side it says 5 minutes. There's a button that corresponds to each side of the clock. When one person moves, they move, and with the same hand that they touch the piece, they touch their side of the clock. When they touch their side of the clock, their own time stops and their opponent's time starts. Then their opponent makes a move and touches the clock. And you keep making moves and hitting the clock until either one side wins the game, there's a checkmate or a draw result, or somebody runs out of time on the clock. If you run out of time on the clock, you lose. My personal addiction is 1-minute blitz on the internet. In fact, a friend of mine calls that video chess crack, where you play each side has 1 minute to make every move in the whole game, so that the entire game of chess will last less than 2 minutes. You're packing the whole thing into less than 2 minutes, and it produces a thrill which is unusual, and it's so addictive. That's why he calls it what I called it. It's the best game in the world.
So not only can the chess clocks can be used to set the time for the class, for the game, but it also can make a game more intense. So if anyone says that a chess game is boring, definitely try it out with the clocks. Of course, there's apps and stuff if you're at home trying to do this that are chess clock apps as well. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up class here, I'm going to go ahead and mention that one of the big things, kind of talk about everything we covered. Hold on. No, I don't know what I just clicked. Hold on. Okay. Apparently I just hit a subtitle section. So there it is. That's what I want. Okay. So let's go back to our overview, and then I have a last video to show. So today we covered the history of chess, It's a game of planning and strategy. We talked about the benefits of playing chess, the sportsmanship and chess etiquette. We also talked about game pieces and movement, how to set up a chessboard, our special rules, our en passant, captures, and then also castling as well. We talked about the algebraic system of chess notation. We talked about strategies, checkmate in one, and we also talked about using our clocks as well. So I have one last video to show, and then we'll finish up class. And this video is actually by Mr. Magnus. He's actually one of the top players in the worlds, and he's actually going to tell us 5 tips for beginner chess players, and we'll wrap up class.
Hello again, chess.com community. Here are my 5 best tips for chess beginners. First of all, play as much chess as possible. Playing really is the best form of training. That's the way you develop your instincts, both positional and tactical. So any playing training is good. Longer games, blitz games against computers, against other humans. Secondly, reading, whether it's books or content on the internet, like videos, watching those. It helps a lot to read about chess, just because you like it, just because you find it interesting, and in the long run it will be very helpful. Number 3, learn the basic mating techniques, like mating with a queen and a rook, or 2 rooks and queen against just the king, or also rook against the king. It's very useful to know. It gives you a lot of confidence that you can finish the game off with a mate, because often especially in games with beginners, you can play very well, you can reach winning position with many pieces up, but it's sometimes hard to checkmate the opponent. And you see in games, even at the very top level, the mating techniques of 2 rooks against a king, and also the mating technique of king and rook against just a king. They are very useful in many endgames. Number 4, learn from the old masters. Throughout my career, I feel that it's been very useful, but most of all very interesting to read about how chess has developed over the years, and to look at the games, especially I think the games since the Capablanca-Algebraic match in 1927. I think ever since then chess has been played at a very high level, and you can learn a lot from all of the great masters. Plus, of course, again, if you're as interested in chess as I am, you will find it very interesting just to read about it. And lastly, but most importantly, have fun. Chess training, practicing, it should be all about having fun. If you find playing long games, if you find playing quick games, if you find solving exercises, reading chess books, watching videos, if you find all of this very interesting and fun, you will come a long way.
There we go. So that's Magnus's top 5 basic tips for new beginners and stuff. So we come to the end of class. Any questions? All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about some of our other classes that we have coming up. So this afternoon, I'll be doing library resources and apps. Talking about free ebooks, just free resources from the library, free audiobooks, and also talking about connecting up, using the free subscription to Acorn TV and Indie Flicks as well, and what's all available with that. Okay. Tomorrow we'll be doing our YouTube 101 at 11 o'clock, so come join me for that. That's a lot of fun. Posting to YouTube, also how their monetary system works, their money system, being paid to do ads. There's a big steep curve. To be able to do that, you need 10,000 subscribers. Okay, so a bit of a big curve to begin with there, but we'll talk about some other ways as well. And then tomorrow afternoon, I've got a new class, Raspberry Pi Computing Live with Alex, projects. And tomorrow I'm actually going to be working on basically making a music machine. So just kind of a stop in. I'll have all the resources listed there, and you can kind of watch me kind of putting it together and everything. Less of a class and more of a kind of, we're working on a project maybe to do for future classes and or putting things together. So just a little side note as we wrap up here. Our libraries are open with limited services and hours. Curbside holds pickup is available. You can go to gchrl.org for details or call into the library with questions Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates. Also, to find our YouTube channel, you're on it right now. You can go to gchrl.org. You can search for UC8. Sorry about that. You can search YouTube for GCHRL videos and find us that way as well. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you either this afternoon or next time. Have a great day. So bye-bye.